Thank you, everyone, and good morning. This is rather strange for me because I haven't travelled very far today, probably about 400 yards from the building over to my right at the sixth form college, but also strange because I'm a graduate of this university, graduating in 1999, and the university has changed significantly, I would imagine, certainly in that time. And almost teaching has changed in that time as well, in those 24 years. As an early career teacher in 2000, I was ceremonially handed an acetate reel with all of the class notes on. And the teacher at the time was, kind of handed this to me, and it was in a kind of display box as well. So things have certainly changed in that period of time. Just a few reflections from me on this morning. I think certainly I sat on the table there thinking that the term digital native is a total myth. We, with our students, perhaps expect them to know how to operate digital systems. It is not true. This idea that students have the skills to access learning on a variety of platforms without training is a total myth. Digital poverty was mentioned this morning. It's a huge issue for us at the sixth form college. We have nearly a third of our students that access bursary payments, where household income is typically below 30,000. So digital poverty is something that is huge for us as an issue. Interestingly as well, about cohort requirements always being kind of at the forefront of our decision-making processes. I thought that was a really interesting point that was raised this morning. So these reflections for me are really important. The context is really important. And for us at the sixth form college to promote wider reading, we needed a simple solution. And we needed the technology to work for us. So I apologise if what I'm about to present to you today is a very simplistic way of sharing resources with our students, but it is something that has definitely worked for us and had a huge impact in ensuring students have access to a range of materials. And of course, that creates a stepping stone to greater development of those skills and greater development of resource acquisition. The sixth form college has around 1,700 students. And we do work in collaboration with Staffordshire University to deliver a range of degree foundation courses, and those are co-taught across the two institutions. I'm going to talk to you briefly about wider reading in further education. I'm kind of teaching to the converted here. We know how important wider reading is for our students. We know how important it is not only to enrich curriculum, but also how wider reading ensures that our students become more sophisticated writers. And that is really important for me. I also think in our context in Stoke-on-Trent, it's really important too. Traditionally, or when we look back across the last 5 to 10 years in Stoke-on-Trent, literacy levels at all stages in education are 5 to 10% below national average. And before I left this morning, I handed my nearly 11-year-old son a box set of Percy Jackson books for his holiday reading. And I will just leave it to your imagination what reaction I got from him. But I suppose it's not unsurprising. It certainly wasn't a surprise to myself and my wife this morning, because he is a reluctant reader. What we are getting through at sixth form education are reluctant readers, and that's why wider reading is really important for us. We went through a process of how do we get our students to access the wider reading that's required for them to become sophisticated writers. I love this quote that I took from Twitter from Peter Knight, who's a local kind of professor. You become a product of what you've read, and we always try to share that with our students. We needed a mechanism for sharing those resources, and therefore over time we needed to develop that information literacy. one really simple solution, which has worked hugely effectively for us, and forgive me that it is something related to my subject area. I'm a geography graduate of this university and a geography teacher over at the sixth form. We've actually used Flipboard as a way of sharing resources with our students. I spent probably 18 months sharing interesting articles, wider reading articles on Twitter, and I felt really good about myself. You know, every day articles were being shared on Twitter, and then I asked my students how many have got a Twitter account, and there was less than 10%. So we needed a different vehicle for sharing that wider reading, and we used a very simple solution, which was Flipboard. It's got an Android and iOS app. It can also be accessed in a web browser, which meant that pretty much all of our students could access this particular platform. It creates a number of magazines. These magazines essentially relate to the topics that we study in A-level geography, and it enabled us to share really very straightforward articles with students, not just from the BBC or other news outlets, but also from newspapers, from The Guardian, which obviously is free to access, but from World Economic Forum and other sources. For myself, in terms of time, very, very simple and straightforward. 2 clicks on your mobile phone and you've shared a really interesting article with students, and it puts it into a magazine format. It puts it into a format that looks really attractive for a young person to access. So over the course of the last 18 months to 2 years, we've been developing a bank of resources. The beauty and the feedback that we got from students was that students enjoyed this format, the magazine format, the quick kind of flicking through the apps that they were using on the phone, and also for us using Teams as a platform. Often posts in Teams got lost and kind of scrolled off the page, and students found it very difficult to access. It's working exceptionally well in terms of students within certainly A-level geography accessing resources, and a number of other departments across the college have also kind of jumped onto this idea. We kind of also spend some time with our students looking at how they go about reading academic journals and academic articles. We kind of break it down into, you know, how do they go about reading, certainly in an age where information is very quick to come to students and they can quickly kind of turn off articles. So we do supplement our work with some kind of academic journals and articles and looking at how to read those papers. In terms of our next steps, and this is where kind of I'm excited about how AI can start to kind of improve students, not only knowledge and understanding, but make them more sophisticated writers. There was somebody who referred to the challenges of assessment. Certainly for us, where we've got terminal exams, and traditionally students are sat in an exam hall for 2.5 hours writing a response to a 45-mark question. AI is a really powerful tool to make our students more sophisticated writers in terms of the language that they are using. So our next steps, we're going to look at producing some student summaries of articles, and we're going to put them into AI and get them to suggest improvements. We're going to compare some student summaries that have been created to those produced. Apologies, there's a slight typo there. So we're going to compare student summaries to those summaries that are produced by AI and do some comparisons of those. We are going to use AI to generate kind of retrieval quizzes based on articles that we're going to share with students. It will enable students to check definitions and phrases, and for us, that's a powerful tool. In terms of concept development, we're going to use AI to get it explained in different forms, in more simplistic language, for any concepts that come up in academic journals or articles. And obviously for us, another important aspect is to support students with lower literacy levels. Interesting what was said earlier from Sam about creating group learning experiences using the AI. So we're going to, again, look at kind of follow-up questions and discussion points from articles. And we're going to ask students to kind of populate AI with chunks of their text and ask it to kind of improve it and rewrite it for them. So ultimately, we want our students to become better writers, and we think that wider reading and the developments in wider reading that we've employed at the college will hopefully help us to achieve those goals. So thank you for listening. My details are on the screen. If anybody does want to connect up further, then please feel free to drop me a line. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really insightful. Any questions from the floor?
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Just a quick question from the perspective of student learning and engagement. I understand the need to sort of use AI and make it easy for the students, but don't you think that sort of stops the journey of the student going out there themselves, trying to learn, trying to find things for themselves rather than relying on a tool, which, you know, puts the solution on a plate? So the effort the student has to go through, or the rigor historically students had to go to, like myself or other students who've been part of the journey, I think at times we're making it a bit easy for them to go and rely on sources such as ChatGPT or otherwise, you know, similar to Wikipedia. To be honest, it's not more of an academic. Whatever's out there, the AI we generate based on what's out there, and that sort of, you know, looking at the debate of the YouTube generation and things like that. I'm not against that, but what I'm trying to understand is how can we actually capture and motivate and inculcate those values in students to be going out there searching for knowledge and then developing that experience themselves rather than relying on ready-made solutions or quick solutions. I understand the urge in this fast-paced world to get knowledge, but where we get it from, how we get it, I think that's very important for students' learning perspective, especially in the long run. Short-term solution, yes, maybe, but long-term, we have to think through how we use these tools. Would you like to give some insight on that?
Yeah, I think for us at the Sixth Form College, we know that our students, just like, you know, in HE, are going to those resources anyway. They're going to ChatGPT and other AI tools more regularly over the last 2 months than we've ever seen. And I think for us at a college, we're at a very early stage of thinking about those very points that you raise. And for me, it's about trying to embrace them. And that's why some of the work around that, the wider reading and using ChatGPT or other AI tools, not just to kind of limit students' research and inquiry, but to support it. And I think it's fair to say that we are at the very earliest of stage in terms of our staff understanding of how AI is going to impact education in the FE sector. And, you know, we're going to trial a few things over the coming months, but certainly I do understand, and I take your point, and I think it's really important. However, you know, we've got students, just I'm sure in HE the same, that are handing in, you know, pieces of work which are AI generated. And a discussion with my colleague this morning about how we kind of move beyond that and try to embrace that technology to make students better learners is really important. I think that's the best answer I can give. It's still, for us, you know, AI is still a phrase that probably many of our staff, we've got nearly 100 staff, teaching staff at the Sixth Form, probably don't even recognise at the moment. So it will be an interesting next few years in terms of its impact on, certainly for us, on things like BTEC and T-level qualifications, whereby there are kind of ongoing assessments. For A-levels, terminal exams, most A-levels are worth about 80% of the marks. So it might be a different process, a different challenge for A-level students.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.